basically in a family, 3 generations of atheists. They were not only atheists, they were very left-wing. My parents were members of the American Communist Party in the 1930s, which is rare. And so their atheism was very strong, very militant, and that's what I grew up with. I assumed that could not be any such thing as God, or it's not possible for there to be a God. Totally materialistic. My father was a chemist, scientist, so that was the worldview I grew up in. And also the same worldview I had when I went to college, where I started studying chemistry, chip off the old block. And, when you're a chemistry major, you also have to learn some physics. So I was learning things about quantum mechanics and things in physics that seemed a little strange to me, but I didn't really worry about it too much. And then eventually I decided I really wanted to study life. And rather than be a biologist, I wanted to study the chemistry of life. So I went into biochemistry, where I got my PhD. And what happened was that even in college, as a young man, I began to feel there was something missing in my life. And I later realized it was some sense of spirituality, which I think is very important for all people. But I found that, whatever that you want to call that, in science at first. I was thinking, well, the science is great because it gives you a real sense of purpose, a real sense of doing something good in the world, and it's true, so it's great. But there was one catch, which was that what I was learning in science didn't jibe with the materialistic worldview. And I couldn't have said it that way. I just felt it. For example, in graduate school, I learned about the process by which proteins are made in cells. And that's a very complex process that involves a tremendous amount of biomolecules interacting with each other, and the complexity is just incredible. And I remember feeling like a chill going down my spine. It was like, this is amazing. How did this get here? And it was something that I couldn't answer. Later, of course, like most biologists, I just came up with the answer, which is evolution. Evolution does everything. But when at that time, I kind of left things as it was and as they were, and I just started wondering about really whether science was really the only way to find any truth. And I pretty soon I rejected that, as many people have. I was not yet ready to believe in God, and that took a lot of other steps. It required me to kind of break down my resistance to the idea, which I was born with. And it's kind of hard to, reject all of that. But eventually I did. And then...
were there any external factors that were helping to open you up?
Yes.
To God?
Absolutely. I was brought to a church by a friend.
And this was still when you were an atheist?
Oh, yeah. And I was, maybe by then I was a little agnostic.
Okay.
I wasn't really sure.
So you got to the point of agnostic all on your own?
That was all on my own, and that was due to the science I was learning. Because the science I was learning did not support a strict atheism. It did not support strict materialism.
Okay.
And that comes from quantum theory, and it comes from, the observer effect and all sorts of things in physics, but it also came from what I was learning in biochemistry and about how life works.
Right.
It just seemed that saying evolution explains everything in life was too glib. It was too easy. It didn't seem to me to be enough.
That's interesting, because I've heard a lot of scientists, even like Peter Atkins, will say that God is like a lazy explanation. And you're saying that evolution is kind of like a lazy explanation?
Well, at that time, I would have said God was a lazy explanation too. I had no idea what the explanation was. I didn't really know what God was. I didn't understand very much about God. But I think evolution can explain a lot. But there are some key things that it cannot explain, and that includes the origin of life. And that's not my view. Darwin said the same thing. Richard Dawkins has said the same thing.
Yeah.
the process of evolution that we call Darwinian evolution or biological evolution doesn't deal with the origin of life at all. So, and I'll get into that a little more, I think. But the external factors that helped me were, as I said, going to a church for the first time and seeing something that I absolutely didn't expect. I thought that when you walked into a church, the first thing that would happen is the priest or the pastor would start yelling at you, telling you that you're sinful and, you're going to go to hell.
Where did you get that impression from?
Well, that's the impression I got growing up, that...
From who, though? Who did... Well, maybe it was a different time, but...
It was a different time, but it was also, by the way, it's not over yet. I mean, you'll still find atheists talking about, the horrors of Christianity and how people are doing nothing but casting you into hell all the time, and lakes of fire and sin, and I felt very nervous, and it was.
And your experience was nothing like that?
No, it was a Catholic church run by Franciscans, and the priest gave a sermon about love. Love, period. Not love God, but just love each other, love. And I thought, boy, this is very mild. Why, I think I've been lied to. So at that point, I looked into this a little more. I wasn't a theist yet, but I started looking at the Bible for the first time. The Old Testament left me a little cold. I couldn't really get into it, didn't understand it much. But I read the book of Matthew and I read the book of Acts, and I found those very moving. The book of Acts struck me as actual history. I was sure that this was not something anyone made up. It just didn't fit. So that got me thinking, and then I learned more and more. And as I talk about in my book, I'm not going to go into detail now, I had several experiences, including some dreams and a waking experience that I had to attribute to the Holy Spirit. And at that point, after many years, by the way, I'm compressing 2 decades into this discussion. But at that point, I realized that Christianity is true, and Christ was real, and he lived and died and rose. And I became a Christian.